Almost missed the landing there. You know, other than the stuff that the government stole after Nikola Tesla died, i.e. all his trunks and his papers, I've greatly studied the works of everything Tesla said, all his interviews. Also, too, all the books written about by Tesla. Oh, by the way, all the like TLC and History Channel and the Science Channel, which is not really science. All these other entities that actually made videos about Tesla, not a single one of them who actually wrote the scripts for those videos knew a single thing about field theory, and they would joke, actually most of them would joke about the Wardenclyffe Tower not working. Well, there's too much energy loss, you know, doing wireless transmission at distance. And they have in their brains, because they don't know any better, that the Wardenclyffe Tower was electrical. There was actually a court case filing a lawsuit, and Tesla was part in the courtroom anyway. And he kept saying over and over again that it was not electrical. But people that make these TLC, the Learning Channel, History Channel, they don't know anything about field theory. They don't know of anything other than what is electrical. They think a lightning is electrical. They think electrostatics are electrical. They've never heard of dielectricity. But anyway, nobody's ever talked about rotating magnetic fields, and I'd like to talk about Nikola Tesla's premise, not only for his AC motor, but also, too, for the premise of free energy. I've said this basically a million times. No AC generator actually generates power. It manifests power because it's an arch form with a temporal component, and that temporal component causes the manifestation. And manifestation, there's an old word for manifestation, it's like prestidigitation. You know, of course, magician is just an illusionist. Not a true magician where like you pull a rabbit out of a hat. You know, a true magician would actually spontaneously manifest a rabbit, and it wouldn't, you know, be tricks up his sleeves and all the other stuff. That's just an illusionist. In the case of an AC generator, which doesn't generate power, it is true manifestation. Spontaneously something from nothing by having a field form and actually causing torque in what is inertia. And inertia is what I'm referring to as the ether. Now, people really don't have in their head the idea of non-Cartesian pure potential. You know, here's nothing with no temporal value, and all of a sudden, poof, by applying an arch form and adding in a temporal component, in the case of the AC generator, we have the manifestation of power. Generation means making something, like I have bread and mayonnaise and salami or something, and then I take these components and I make a sandwich out of it, right? So I'm generating something out of things that are already palpable, demonstrable, and phenomenal, and that's not how an AC generator works. And I'd like to give you some quotes from Nikola Tesla, but I first like to use a demonstration again when we talk about precession. Talking about Nikola Tesla's quotes anyway, talking about the rotating magnetic field. A three-dimensional force vector actually has a precessional rate. The typical, the median gyromagnetic precession, and you look this up, type in gyromagnetic precession on a Google search, or type in L'Amour frequency. This is also, too, how they calibrate MRI machines for ultimate clarity. There is a precession rate. Yeah, let me actually spin up a gyroscope here. Any three-dimensional force vector, necessitatively of its own accord, because magnetism is force in motion, and is a centrifugal divergent vector of the extrapolation of the magnetic field, because the magnetic field's geometry is a torus. Well, a torus is a demonstrable mass magnitude volume that, by its own manifestation, must partake of a temporal component, because the three-dimensional force vector, to work its way around, kind of like a lighthouse, you know, when a lighthouse has a sweeping light, you know, what is the rate at which the lighthouse sweeps? Like, well, here's boop, say 5-6 seconds later, it makes its full revolution. That's not a L'Amour frequency, and it's not precession, but it's the cyclic rate. Anything that's demonstrable that actually covers a mass, which of course any toroid does, even on the level of a field, partakes of a temporal component. So, spinning up a low friction gyroscope here, if I place it on my hand, even on the table would be the same. You see the top spinning? What's the precession rate currently? 1, 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, 4 1, 5 1000. Basically 5 seconds. Its precessional rate to, and if you actually were able to do a three-dimensional model of this precession and of course suspend this, it would actually be a toroidal extrapolation. And of course it'll increases as it spins down. But this is the rotation necessary to complete the extrapolation of that geometry, i.e. of a force vector. And Nikola Tesla talks about this, and it's his indication of free energy. Now Nikola Tesla's AC generator, basically, and I've said this many, many times also too, any AC generator technically is an inside-out magnet. A magnet, of course, has a magnetic field on the outside, the dielectric and the plane of inertia on the inside. A magnet is an AC generator is an inside-out magnet. Magnetic fields on the inside. And of course, there's many different types: 3-phase, 4-phase, 5-phase, 6-phase, contactless armatures. But the plane of inertia, the dielectric with the manifestation, including the temporal component of the rotating magnetic field that's on the inside, which of course is driven by steam or wind or, hydroelectric. You take the magnetic field inside and you rotate it. Anyway, Nikola Tesla goes into a great length on his rotating magnetic field, and I'll get to the most important point here at the last, but let me give you a few quotes from Tesla, and he's referring to free energy, but his first iteration is his AC generator, but he actually works and is building upon, and ultimately the Wardenclyffe Tower, which was not finished, and there was lawsuits and other things, and the sponsor, I forget the old rich guy, Westinghouse, didn't want to take it to fruition. That's a whole other story. Fundamental discovery of the original invention is always useful, but it is often more than that. There are physicists and philosophers to whom the marvelous manifestations of my rotating magnetic field, not meaning his AC generator, but his discovery thereof. In other quotes he talks about his discovery. He is referring to it as my rotating magnetic field because it is his discovery. The suggestive phenomena of rotation without visible connection, the ideal beauty of my induction motor with its contactless armature, yada, yada, yada. I'll go on to the next quote here. Medalist tonight was a man who saw in his mind wheels going around where there were no means of getting alternating current motors to rotate. When the alternating current would do everything but make wheels go round, he devised rotating magnetic fields so prophetically in his mind's eye, referring to himself, that the rotating magnetic wheel would set wheels going round and round all over the land, all over the world, and the vision is carried out. And we recognize that vision here. And it goes on. As to the idea of rendering energy of the sun available for industrial purposes, it fascinated me early, but I must admit that it was only long after I discovered rotating magnetic fields that it, meaning magnetism, that it took a firm hold upon my mind. Assailing the problem, I found two possible ways of solving it. Either power was to be developed on the spot by converting the energy of the sun's radiation or the vast reservoirs of energy to be transmitted economically to any distance. He's talking about taking advantage of instantaneous action at a distance and wireless power induction by means of what magnetism is. Magnetism implies the toroidal geometry of force and motion, which necessitatively implies, of course, the rotating magnetic field, because all magnetic fields have rotation, and that rotation is called gyromagnetic precession, just like you saw the gyroscope precess. Also, too, called the L'Amour frequency, which average L'Amour frequency is 42 megahertz. That's the cyclic rate of a typical, and it varies depending on the type of magnetic field, how demonstrable it is. There's many different variables to complete its cycle. Here's the one thing, and nobody that is supposedly an expert on Tesla talks about this regarding Nikola Tesla, and he considers this more important than all of his inventions. This is Nikola Tesla, November 1928 interview, articles New York World, November 29. No, this is the second one, excuse me. This is from A Famous Prophet of Science Looks into the Future, Popular Science Monthly of November 1928. Towards the end of the interview, we asked Tesla which arena of science most appealed to him. Radios, airplanes, so on and so forth. It was not the induction motor, instead, that Tesla refers to. Instead, it was the discovery of the principle that preceded the induction motor. The principle of rotating magnetic fields. Tesla answered, rotating magnetic field was dearest to my heart. When I made the discovery of the rotating magnetic field, I was a very young man. Revelation came. It's not the AC generator, okay? It's not his invention or any invention. It's the principle behind same, and I'll get to that here. Rotating magnetic fields were dearest to my heart. When I made the discovery, I was a very young man. The revelation came after years of concentrated thought, and it was my first great thrill. It was not only a valuable discovery capable of extensive practical applications, it was a revelation of new forces and new phenomena unknown to science before. No, Dr. Tesla said with some feeling, I would not give up my discovery of rotating magnetic field for 1,000 inventions, however valuable, designed merely as mechanical contraptions to deceive the eye and the ear. Then saying, Mr. Tesla said, this is really very important passage from Tesla. Nobody talks about it. 1,000 years hence, in the future, the telephone and the motion picture camera may be obsolete, but the principle of a rotating magnetic field will remain a vital, living thing for all time to come. In other words, forever and ever and ever. Here's another quote. This is New York, that's a really important quote, by the way. New York World University, November 29, 1929. Like his, meaning Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla talking about Edison, my induction motor may be discarded and forgotten in the continuous evolution, meaning of electrical motors. But my discovery of the rotating magnetic field with its marvelous phenomena and manifestations of force, i.e. magnetism itself, will last as long as science itself. Of all the inventions Tesla came up with, these two quotes will tell you that above all of his inventions, way above that, and for all time in perpetuity, forever and ever and ever and ever, the most important thing he's telling people is his discovery. You know, he didn't invent it. It's been there since all time and before time and after time. Discovery of the rotating magnetic field. This is the precessional rate of the extrapolation of the toroidal geometry that is magnetism. Magnetism is a toroidal field. Magnetism, by the way, is the dielectric field. It's like saying ice is the field of water. Yeah, ice and water are the same thing, right? Well, we got this unique word called ice. It means cold water. We have this unique word for dielectricity called magnetism. I mean, the loss of that energy or inertia manifests as a three-dimensional force vector. If you actually take a torus or a donut and you draw a perfect a full extrapolation from the furthest most reaches of a torus is a three-dimensional S-curve, and the extrapolation of that is the precession that you actually saw in this gyroscope, and it has a rate. And that rate is a temporal component, and here's the important part that everybody fails to see. We have the AC motor, which is used in basically everything. Yeah, wonderful. Some are a lot more efficient today than they were back then, obviously so. Well, the magnetic field itself has a temporal variable. All current energy manifestation, i.e. so-called AC generator, which is not a generating anything, is an arch form with a temporal component. Well, the magnetic field already has a temporal component. All energy is produced, of course, by rotating the magnetic field against an armature with respect to time. The only thing we're doing in any AC generator, we couple it with falling water or a wind turbine. We're actually introducing a temporal variable of a rotating magnetic field with the staged gears to actually to increase the gear differentials, to increase the magnetic frequency of the field against the dielectric plane, i.e. the armature and the coil system for more efficient AC generator. This temporal component already exists in the magnetic field. What Nikola Tesla is referring to and implying, and as a part of his Wardenclyffe tower, which of course never got finished, is that gyromagnetic precession, i.e. the extrapolation of the magnetic field, is the temporal component whereby which free energy will be able to be manifest. I've been talking about this now for a few years, but I've never made a video on this, and I've gone through all the references of rotating magnetic fields that Nikola Tesla has ever made, at least the ones we have access to. This is, of course, the gyromagnetic precession. You know, the inbuilt component of the magnetic field, that L'Amour frequency, the time to cycle, called the L'Amour frequency, implied and no different than the geomagnetic precession of the toroidal magnetic field. This is the temporal component. So we already have the temporal component built into the magnetic field. The question is, what is the specific arch form for harvesting the temporal component already extant, already pre-existing in all magnetic fields to extrapolate free energy? I thought for a long time that free energy was a pipe dream. I know I was wrong. I made that discovery several years ago. I know that it is not wrong, but I don't know what, and I don't pretend to know. And I've thought about it a lot. What is that specific field geometry, whereby which, from which, and by which we're able to extrapolate out free energy by using the geomagnetic precession, i.e. the temporal component of the three-dimensional force vector, which is magnetism, which is the toroidal field. This is Nikola Tesla's rotating magnetic field, which I've already proven to you by Nikola Tesla's own words. The most important discovery, way above all of his inventions, way above his patents and his glory and all the rest of it. That's his biggest thrill. He said it's his biggest thrill. The discovery, he said, the most important thing for all time to come, forever and ever and ever into the future. No matter how many inventions or improved inventions, the most important thing. How come nobody of these so-called Tesla experts ever talk about this? I don't know of one that ever has. So there's the temporal variable whereby which free energy will be had, is using what is natively already there. But that requires a field geometry, which is different than an AC generator's field geometry. That's all an AC generator is a field geometry, and we couple it to an armature that's moved either by wind or by steam, or and of course just a giant boiler in the case of a nuclear reactor. It's heating up water and it's turning a turbine. We wouldn't need to couple it to anything. There would only need to be a specific field geometry, an arch form, and we would take advantage of that temporal component, and then we would actually have power. That's the only reason we get electricity today from hydroelectric or wind. Solar is something completely different. The only thing we're doing with that is using that kinetic action coupled to an arch form for the manifestation of power. Well, the kinetic action is only rotating the magnetic field. Well, the magnetic field itself is already rotating. This means we don't need to have an armature hooked to kinetic action in the case of steam or wind, and that is incredibly important. Cut my hand. Sorry about that. Keep picking on it. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to contact me. My email is below. Any donation is always warmly welcome. Or you can email me telling me what you didn't like about it or your thoughts. Thanks. I read every comment. Thank you.